Hello and welcome to an Infinity the Game battle report. Today we're playing JSA Ōban versus Tohaa, and the scenario is supplies. This battle report comes with thanks to two different channel supporters. The first is Croxatau, who requested either Tohaa or Tunguska in a bat rep. We are seeing Tohaa today, played by my friend Ed. And the second channel supporter, Dennis, who requested either VCA or JSA Ōban. I will be playing Ōban in this battle report. Now, my list is on screen there, and in terms of how we assessed JSA Ōban during the deranged hot take straight out of 2 days into the release tier list that I did with Jordan, we considered basically all three of the JSA sectorals and vanilla armies to be pretty solid, like good, solid, middleweight factions, maybe slightly higher end of B. And at the time, my assessment was that Ōban was probably the best of the three. Now, I have moderated that a little bit since. I think Ōban and Shinden Butai are actually very, very close, and which one is better, and there will be a Shinden Butai faction focus coming up relatively soon, which one is better is going to be down to where along the weight scale of miniatures you want to play is. So I feel like Ōban has much better low end than Shinden Butai, and we can see that in this list. The Kisotsu are just probably some of the best line infantry in the game. Like, they are, if there is a better utility line infantry setup than the Kisotsu can bring, it's I have not seen it, basically. They are probably the best line infantry in the game, or at least tied for best, just in terms of their general utility. And then we have things like Yanyans as well. And so that provides, for a very cheap cost, just an incredible base to the faction, which you can then use to flex into fairly solid top end. Now, the stuff, when I talk about top end, I'm talking about things that are like north of 40 points. And I would say that the things that are north of 40 points in Ōban are probably a little bit better than the things in Shinden Butai. It's close. Like, that's definitely like much more comparable. But there are pieces like the Shikami and the Oyuroi Lieutenant that I really like in Ōban. So I feel like the strength of Ōban relative to Shinden Butai is that, like, below 20 points, below 10 points even in some cases, and then above 40 points. That's Ōban's territory. By comparison, Shinden Butai has some just incredible pieces in the like 20 to 40 point range. Stuff like the STRS Tanuki team duoed with Arushi, that is 41 points in 1 SWC if you take the Hacker, Disco Ball, Pitcher, Tanuki. And the amount of raw capability you get out of just those two models is ridiculous. I will talk about that in the Shinden Butai faction focus, but like, by God, the middleweight of Shinden Butai is outstanding. Things like the Shizoku unit as well, the heavy infantry, the like elite gunfighting, yes, frenzy heavy infantry, just a hell of a profile for a quite attractive points cost if you can just manage frenzy, etc. So this is a list that I feel like leans into Ōban's strengths. And so what we're playing with is an Oyuroi Lieutenant and a Shikami as our two most expensive pieces. Now, the Oyuroi in N5 I consider to be a solid tag. It is expensive. There are cheaper tags that will gunfight just as well as it does, but I am a sucker for a Lieutenant Tactical Awareness tag in a faction with very, very cheap chain of command. So the Oyuroi Lieutenant, comparing it to other tags, you might say, well, it's a lot more expensive for some niche capability, but its close combat is genuinely good. It has stealth, it's a main layer, etc. So I feel like in this case, given what it's playing around, you got to spend those points you save by taking Kisotsu somewhere, and the Oyuroi is a great place to do so, and then the Shikami. Now, the Shikami is very expensive, but it just does so many incredibly cool things. When I was writing this list, I tried really hard to shoehorn in a Shikami duo, and you can kind of do it if you make an awful lot of cuts elsewhere in the list, but there was other stuff that I wanted to include, so ultimately it was just a single Shikami, and I like this profile a ton. The amount of things the Shikami can do, it's so mobile. Yes, it's 6'2" on foot, but it's never going to be making those movements across the table. It will be making 8 and then 6-inch jumps. It gunfights well, it has stealth, it has eclipse, it's heavy infantry, so it's durable. It has incredible close combat. It's a specialist. It's just, this is one of the reasons. The Shikami, it's not an every list kind of model, because 47 points, you got to find those points somewhere, but it is probably one of those joy to play pieces, hard to find comparable pieces in the game. We then have a little biker duo. Now, I didn't think of this. We have a friend of mine called Jacob, who is getting back into JSA in N5. This duo is his idea. Jacob, credit to you for coming up with this. This is a duo that I didn't actually expect to do great work. and it would be pretty good this game. So this is a pure duo, so you get full link bonuses. The arrow, you get the special die link bonus, which means that, among other things, the Karoshi Rider's smoke grenade launcher actually becomes relatively reliable. The gunfighting on either of them, despite the fact that they have limited cover, is serviceable. The Karoshi Rider's is Whip 14 specialist. She's okay, like she's good enough in melee to get melee kills against non-experts, and for less than 40 points for 2 orders, and just like, these are fast. These are Arigotos, so they just absolutely motor, and they would do great work in different capabilities over the course of this game. We then have the first of 2 Kasotsu teams, and in both teams you will notice sort of similar profiles. That starts with the 12 points. I don't know why this model is 12 points, but this is the Ballistic Skill Attack -3 Thunderbolt Kasotsu profile. Now, frankly, you could probably spam these, but I have put just one in each link. This one's going to be getting up to Ballistic Skill 12 because there are 4 Kasotsu. The other will be just a Ballistic Skill 11. This is just for the cost. Like, it's not an Apex gunfighter. It's 12 points. It's 12 points. I don't think there is a better 12-point gunfighter in the game, particularly given how easy it is to link it. We then have a Kasotsu Hacker, Crazy Koalas, ECM Hacker, again, only with 12, but fantastic profile. The Kenpai Chain of Command for 17 points, because we're taking an Oyuroi Lieutenant, we may as well. Then a Kasotsu Paramedic. We then have a Robio Flash Pulse Bot, and then a Chain Rifle Yan. Very cheap, 6 points, nice and fast, throw smoke, yep, excellent. These will be used to do things like lay down smoke to get me towards objective, so we're supporting either the Arigoto Karoshi Rider duo or the Shikami, depending on what needs it. Second combat group, we then have a 3-person, a Haris Kasotsu team. We can't do them, but we can form up Haris teams. And we have another Kasotsu Thunderbolt, a Kasotsu AP Rifle, and a Kasotsu Hacker. The Hacker is kind of particularly important here, because if this group is not just yeeting around the Yan throwing smoke, it needs to be doing something, and laying out Crazy Koala's perimeter weapons with the Kasotsu Hacker gives us something to do with this group. We then have a Ryuken Surprise Attack. This is just a buy me a first turn piece if I think I need it. This Ryuken can be very hard to engage if you don't have a visor. It presents a nasty threat, particularly with Decoy and Mine Layer. So it's just a, in case your opponent goes first and really tries to put the boot in, you have some kind of a defense I'll spend those 23 points just to buy me the better part of a first turn. Now, having now played this, I am not 100% on the combat group setup. I might do something, for example, like move both Yans into group 2, just because there are pieces in that first combat group that the Karoshi Rider, Arigoto, Shikami, and Oyuroi really can spend orders. So the balance here I'm not 100% on, but I am happy with all of the pieces that were in this list. Now, playing against me will be Ed, who is playing Tohaa. Ed is looking at a few different factions for CanCon, same as me. I'm looking at Tohaa. Ed is also looking at Tohaa. This represents Ed's line of thought. We haven't really talked much together about what it is we each think would be good in the faction. So there are some things here that I wouldn't necessarily use, and some things that I wouldn't necessarily use, and things here that I would that are absent. So things that are absent, for example, are the Corsair Engineer, which I think is not a must take, but it's a very, very useful piece for Tohaa in this edition. Being able to do things like turn off repeaters and turrets in zone of control using the Eclipse and Mirror Ball just is a luxury that is worth taking in a faction that otherwise struggles to deal with them. Things that I wouldn't necessarily use, I am moving away from the Nikul Mine Layer. It's not ostensibly a bad piece, it is a good buy you a first turn piece, but Tohaa have a sure feat of those already, and the changes to Viral and the introduction of Albedo that actually is worthwhile now. There are just a number of ticks against the Nikul that make it just a bit harder to recommend in N5. Especially the change to Viral, for example, would matter this game. It would make it very easy for me to do a risk assessment on whether or not I wanted to engage this with a tag, for example. So I'm not 100% on that. But otherwise, we've got some really solid stuff in here. We have a Clipsos Forward Observer. Clipsos picked up a point of ballistic skill, which is very nice. Just a good model to have in supplies. 2 Chuckster Auxiliaries. Now, there's an interesting thing here, because we'll also see, this is sort of like Tohaa vibes, 2 Chuckster Auxiliaries and 1 Carry. The Carry is an EM Mine Layer. Excellent choice. Really rounds out Tohaa's defenses against stuff that they otherwise couldn't hurt with Ferroware. I think the correct amount of Chuckster is always at least 1 if you have even a single tack wheel, and ideally it's 1 Chuckster per tack wheel, because tack wheel now they still have endgame, but endgame alone among Ferroware, the lethal Ferroware, is disposable, and being able to auto reload that is a big deal. So good use of Chucksters, Libertos Mine Layer, and a Diplomatic Delegate. In Combat Group 1, so this is a 6-9 split, We have one 3-person team and 2 duos. Tohaa run duos very well because they can form duos out of anyone and they will get the burst bonus. So we have a Haris of Sukwel HMG, Takwil Lieutenant +1 command token, Kamal Paramedic, then a duo of Sukwel K1 Sniper, Kelta Chain of Command, and then a duo of Takwil Chain of Command, Kelta. Now it might be that like the Lieutenant gets moved around and stuff, but that's basically the loadout. We have a viral combi on the Takwil Chain of Command. So the idea there is that it basically just runs around. It can gunfight if it needs to. It runs around with the Kael'tar just giving it a burst bonus. We then have a Kaori Sentinel Mine Layer, excellent choice, and a Motorized Bounty Hunter, rounding the list out to a clean 6 SWC and 300 points. Now, important things to note, mechanical advantages Tohaa might enjoy that would be very relevant this game. We will see lots of use of Ferrowear. Turns out it's still very good. We will also see, despite the fact that Sukwales haven't really changed in cost in any material way, the fact that Warhorse is a really good skill right now is going to come up. I am sitting here with my list with multiple models with Ballistic Skill Attack -3 that are relying on that. Like a Kasotsu needs its BS Attack -3 to be active to have a chance to win a face-to-face roll, and one of Ed's ARO pieces and Ed's primary gunfighter are immune to that. So Sukwales are in a fantastic place. News at 11, they've kind of never not been. Sukwales are in an excellent place in N5, and probably 2 of those at least goes into every Tohaa list. I am running 3 in plenty of cases, and that does not feel like overkill. So overall, very solid Tohaa list, well adjusted to the mission with a Kamal Paramedic, lots of good specialists, lots of Ferrowear. The biggest issue Ed is going to have is dealing with my tag, because there's a lot of viral weapons here, and only so much that can threaten it at range. With that all said, let's get on into the game. So Whip 13 versus Whip 14 Lieutenant, I've won the roll and Snap picked first turn. Supplies is a scenario where you can kind of go either way on first or second, depending on a few different things, but I would say it is first player favored, and if you are playing second player, there are edges that you can take, but really it is first player advantage. It's just there is play for the second player. Also, Ed is a player who I know has a heritage in Spiral Core, and because he has a heritage in Spiral Core, that means I have to at least be aware of the risk of Greif operators and counterintelligence, and I don't want to deal with either of those things because they are very good going first. So I've just snap-picked going first, no regrets whatsoever. Now, just quickly in terms of terrain, this table looks relatively congested, but things to note. These grey FDM barricades, these ones here and here, what we are doing, even though they're technically a little bit taller than Silhouette 2, we are playing those as vaultable by Silhouette 2. This just opens up the field a little bit, makes it a little bit easier to move in and around. So for example, this sort of selection of buildings and the barricade here, this can be easily left or attacked by Silhouette 2 models if you need. However, these barricades, despite the fact that they have holes in them, we're treating them as solid. This building is open in an interior. These buildings have open interiors as well. We are playing the windows as muddy, that is to say you can see and be seen if you're in contact with a window, the doors as open, and the buildings as see into or out of, but not through. This building is not allowed to have any troops on top, because stuff dealing with that, and otherwise all rooftops are accessible by finding a door at ground level. If you use the move action while in contact with the door at ground level, you just move to the space on the roof above the door. So for example here, if a trooper was to walk up to this door and then declare the move skill while in contact with it, they'd be placed there and could continue their turn. So for my deployment, I've put my HVT over here in this corner, but then pulled everything kind of away from that and built my defenses in about 2/3 of my deployment zone. So we have the smaller Kasotsu team over here. For now, mostly because of the threat of Sukwales, the Thunderbolts are all just prone because I don't want to put them out. They would just be meat for the wolves if a Sukwale HMG is around, and it's likely to be. So the first smaller Kasotsu team is here, down behind these stairs and on this roof. The second larger Kasotsu team is on this rooftop and in the enclosed alleyway behind it. The Ryukin and its decoy are on these rooftops here. This one, closer to my right table edge, is the real one. Specifically, the line of fire for both of them are pretty good. They've got these lines sort of like across the table like that, but blocked. They cannot be seen from Ed's deployment zone. Specifically, the reason why this one is the real one is that it's just got a little bit of a line down into the building, which I want just in case of Ferrowear. We then have the Aragoto duo deployed down here. The Kasotsu, the Aragoto biker itself, is further back, and the Karoshi rider is further forward. The Shukami and both Yanyans are deployed down here, sort of in this alleyway, ready to move either into the building or up through this alley here. And the Oyuroi would eventually reserve drop here, ready to move out either to face, sort of like fight up in either of these directions. Now, for Ed's part, he is relatively hunkered down, but with some ARO pieces just to buy him some time. So we have a Nickel with a Symbiomate on this pack of crates. It will have to be engaged before I can move forward with anything really significant. We have the Sukweo K1 Sniper on this building here, which has got a good solid line down there. So if I want to go for the middle objective, I'll need to engage it. But then otherwise, everything is basically just hunkered down and relying on templates, mines, ferroware, etc. to defend itself. So we have the first, the duo with the chain of command Lieutenant Tackwheel here. We then have the Haris team hanging out behind these barricades here. Chain of command Kael'thas. So Ed's in no danger of loss of lieutenant with 2 chain of command models. Basically everything just hunkered down in and around kind of this space with the biker and another Tracks of baggage are here, and we've got a mine from the Nickel and an EM mine from the Cowrie there. So kind of off-center to myself, but Ed is a little bit more spread out over his deployment zone. And in particular, he has good overwatch over basically all 3 of the objectives, which is the reason why he picked that table edge. Now, I begin my first turn. I elect to spend a command token to say I will have access to Speedball, then I promptly forget it for the entirety of the turn. Ed does the same, and will also forget that he has Speedball for the entirety of his turn. We take some impetuous moves, but fairly just little impetuous moves with the Yarn-Yarns that don't make a great deal of impact, because most of what we need to do is engage the Nickel, get down smoke, and then at that point decide if we're going to do a bums rush into Ed's deployment zone, which I decide against. I don't quite have enough orders, or go after objectives. And so this will be the first of a couple of turns that the Karoshi and Aragoto really show their quality. So Yarn-Yarns, Fizz 14 smoke, excellent. They will come up and around kind of through this building. Oh, the Libertos, by the way, is reserved to drop here. You cannot see it, but it's got its mine, and the mine and the Libertos are hanging out down in this alleyway, protecting this objective. So we combine like smoke grenades with the irregular orders from a couple of Yarn-Yarns, and what we do is we get smoke down basically here, here and here to enable us to move comfortably through these alleyways. And then with some spare orders from Combat Group 2, the second Yarn-Yarn basically will move out and around, dodge to trigger the Libertos mine, and then hunker down prone behind this barricade. I then attempt to take a face-to-face roll between this Thunderbolt, Kasotsu, and the Nickel, which it can just see, but I had terribly misjudged the range, which is a thing that will happen from time to time, and it's 36 inches, and I'm at bad range, mimetism, blah blah blah. Ed crits, so that's fantastic, and I do not, and even if I'd gotten the range correct, a crit from a Nickel is a crit from a Nickel, and that poor Kasotsu goes all the way extremely to dead. Not to worry, we have other guns in the list, and so up trots the Oyuroi using its Lieutenant and Tactical Awareness Order. It'll move around to here, lay a Crazy Koala, and then move around to here and engage the Nakul, and it will put it in the dirt in one face-to-face roll. Like, just clean. It misses, I hit 4 times or 3 times, and Ed fails 2 of his 3 saves, and that's rough. That's real bad for a Nickel with a Symbiomate. So it goes unconscious but not dead. I can get a line on it and try and kill it if I was to pull back, vault up over this kind of like gantry here. I would be able to see it if I did that, but I am not inclined to go to that amount of effort because we have scenario stuff that we need to do. And so this is where the speed of the Karoshi Rider and Aragoto come into play, because they are fast. And in no time at all, they rip up through this alleyway protected by smoke. The Karoshi Rider picks up this objective. They rip through to here. Again, these are like 8-6 movements. The Aragoto picks the supply box up from the Karoshi Rider. The Karoshi Rider picks up this objective, and then they pull all the way back, comfortably all the way back into my deployment zone, with like pretty close to, I think I had 1 or 2 orders to spare. So they're going to end up hanging out back here. I will then use a coordinated order just to put, like the last order that I have, I will use it to put the Oyuroi, the Shikami, and the Karoshi Rider into suppressive fire, and then pass the turn back to Ed. So 1 kill through a Symbiomate for the loss of one of my own troopers is not a good first turn in terms of offensive capability. That's not the amount of damage that you would like to do, but Tohaa in N5 as in N4 are tricky to layer punch into, and they don't move all the way across the table that easily. Tohaa can efficiently move up into the midfield and beyond, but they're still moving at 4-4 speed with a fairly normal number of orders. What they're good at doing is moving groups of capability forward, little link teams that can do many things, but it's going to be difficult for Tohaa to assault a deployment zone. Not impossible, but difficult, and still accomplish other stuff. Ed is going to make a game attempt of it though, and he does have 10 orders to do so. So on his turn, it's basically Ferroware, Eclipse, and the Paramedic Paramedic Kelta are the game in town here. And so this Haris team that he's got over here, the Sukhwel HMG, the Kamel Paramedic, and his Takwil Lieutenant, are going to move up and around through here. They will lay down smoke as needed because there is a suppressive fire Oyuroi hanging out here at the end of the turn. They will lay down smoke, they will move up through here, and they will start throwing out erasers and endgames. Both Yanyans will go down. The two uses of endgame will each kill all the way to dead, tragic, a Yanyan. So this one here and this one here will both die to... No, sorry, the first one actually gets killed to dead by successive uses of endgame. The Libertos is what will follow up and will die, triggering a bunch of koalas and killing the second Yanyan. So both of my Yanyans will die. There will be no further casualties this turn, except a casualty of my heart, because Ed will elect to use the Symbio Bomb on the Sukhwel to isolate the Shikami, which I feel very sad about, because I had great hopes for that Shikami, and it is going to spend the rest of the game attempting to reset on 4s, which it will not succeed. So that was very mean, that was cruel. That is one of the most interesting and excellent pieces I have in my list, and Ed has effectively rendered it null and void, which made me a very sad boy. The remainder of Ed's orders, and he just barely has enough, will be to pull back, grab this supply box with the Kamel Paramedic, and basically just return to the position he was in the deployment zone and hunker down. So at the end of Ed's first turn, I have sustained more casualties than he has. He's used up his Symbio Bomb, he's used up some of his Ferroware, but that's just easily reloaded by the Chaxa when he gets back to his deployment zone. I have 2 boxes and he have 1, and I can move some models around basically now and launch a big attack on his deployment zone. So the attack that I wasn't quite willing to make on the first turn, I am now willing to make on the second. His nickel is down, and I do, if I needed, have ample access to smoke. And so going into the second turn, that's what we're going to do. The Oyuroi will be spending most of the orders here, and it actually just has a clean run around the Sukhwel HMG. It's basically just going to run around here and run through here. Along the way, it's going to kill the biker. It's going to knock the Chaxa unconscious. No, how does the Chaxa go down? He's actually just going to circumnavigate the Chaxa and come around here into close combat with this Takwil, and he will knock it unconscious. And at that point, he will get flash pulsed by this Kael'thas specialist here. Now, Kael'thas specialists flash pulses. This is not a linked flash pulse because it goes down. It's linked. Because I will be engaging it in the same order as I engage the Takwil that it's duoed with. Flash pulses are weaker in N5, they're not double action anymore, and the Oyuroi has good BTS, but it hits and I fail my save, and so the Oyuroi is stunned, and I don't have anything I can do about that. I do take a wound from the Chaxa's Heavy Flamethrower, but that is repaired by the auto repair kit that I remember to cool down this turn, so the Oyuroi is going to end up stunned in Ed's deployment zone, but having done some damage along the way. Now, it took so few orders to do that because the Oyuroi was mostly using its own Lieutenant and Takaware order, that I'm like, well, I've got to do something with the rest of my group, and the Shikami tried to reset and failed, so it's the biker time again, I suppose. And so what I do is I spend a couple of orders on the Kusotsu Link team here, and they will move to pick up boxes from if they 3 orders, in 3 orders they will pick up both boxes from the bikers, and the Thunderbolt will just take a shot and put down the unconscious Nickel, just lest Ed attempt. Ed attempted once already, but only attempted once and missed both shots with the Medi Dart. I don't want that thing coming back, so I put it down. That's 3 orders. I still have at that point like 6 orders remaining, and 6 orders on a unit of bikes that moves 8/6 is plenty of orders. So the bikers rear out again, and basically like just all the way around to Ed's deployment zone. We have to deal with the Chaxa, and so how we're going to do that is the Kuroshi Rider will get to here, and I actually just fling the Aragoto around. It comes around here, it engages a bunch of stuff. This is a comedy of errors because everything, no matter what, makes its BTS or armor saves, but I eventually put the Chaxa to unconscious before the biker itself dies. That's a bit less than I would have liked. It's not bad, it's just less than I would have liked, but the Kuroshi will be here at least, sort of surrounded by the various corpses of our enemies. Now, Ed elects to not attempt to regenerate the Takwil, because if he did, it would have put the Oyuroi into close combat, which makes the Oyuroi harder to deal with, but he's not in the most terrible position. He has to solve this problem that I have made in this area, and he can, but that is going to take most of his turn, and it's going to be this Haris team that does it. So on this turn, he calls down his speedball, and the only important one is that the Sukway will pick up a Vita Pack, and then they move up and around this direction. If the Aragota wasn't already dead, this is the point where they kill it, and then the Sukway with her Symbiomate basically just hops up here and starts engaging the Oyuroi. And this is a back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. I hit her with a heavy flamethrower like 3 times, and she passes multiple saves. In one case, Symbiomate takes a save, no problem. The Symbiomate fails its save, she takes a wound, but then the Vita Pack triggers and heals her before she would drop down to have damaged Symbiomate. Or damage Symbioma, she won't transmute, basically. The Vita Pack kicks in during the resolution step before transmutation does. So she loses the wound, she regains the wound, she doesn't transmute. And then she is just firing her breaker pistols at the Oyuroi who is flamethrowing her back. And she passes like so many saves, and the Oyuroi passes so many saves, until eventually the Oyuroi just loses all of its wounds in one order, and she passes another save against the heavy flamethrower, which is tragic, but this is the kind of thing that happens when you leave a tag this ass deep in your opponent's deployment zone. I think, frankly, if I was being a little more sensible about my turn, what I should probably have done is just pull the Oyuroi back, right? Like, it was just stunned. It can't declare attacks. Yes, it might get hit by a Chaksa. Yes, it might get hit by a light shotgun. But if I had just pulled it back, I could have put it in a position that was much harder to engage. But I didn't. I left it there, and it did get killed. The Kuroshi Rider, however, Ed does not have the orders to both deal with the tag and deal with the Kuroshi Rider. So the tag, the Oyuroi Lieutenant, basically spends its life consuming all of Ed's second turn. And given that Ed is holding 1 box and I am holding 2, that's pretty much fine. Now, the problem that I have at this juncture, going into my 3rd turn, we can see the game state here with the Oyuroi dead, or unconscious rather, is firstly Ed is going to paramedic back the blasted Chaksa and regenerate the Sukwale, the Takwheel officer, which I am a little bit sad about. That's a little bit of a shame. Blunts the impact that I had. I really wanted him to have fewer orders, especially going into his 3rd turn. And secondly, I've done 0 classifieds, and I basically can do 0 classifieds because my classifieds are all doing stuff with Ed's HVT, which is all the way over here, and I need to data scan the HVT and then assassinate the HVT. Now, this Link team can do that, but the models that are holding the supply boxes are the models I would have to move. So the logistical effort to get those pieces all the way across there, hand boxes over along the way, leave certain models behind, I am unconvinced I can do that with the orders that I have. And so instead, we are going to go on a bit more of a rampage with the Kuroshi Rider. And so what she is going to do is lay down some smoke here, move up and kill the Chaksa in melee. That'll take a couple of orders. Zoom back into the building. We're saying we can move through these windows, remember, and around here. Kill once again the Takwheel, and then rip up around this direction, where she will get a line into all 3 of these models here. Tragically, she lacks a template, but what she does do is there's a mix of dodges and shots. She's already dogged at this point because she's been endgamed once already. She puts all 3 burst combi into this Chaksa baggage bot here, which is the last Chaksa, and she kills it. And because she's killed it, none of the end games that Ed has expended on her in ARO will reload, which means that Ed is going into his 3rd turn, yes, with a reasonable order pool, yes, with an intact triad, but with no endgame. And endgame is just it's one of the tools that I don't have to deal with because I have a bunch of biological fools holding boxes. Now, that is pretty much all we can do with the turn. We will once again move the Shikami forward out into the open, looking down this alleyway, and it will attempt to reset and it will fail, and then we just move the helper bot around and forward. Now, I am attempting to move it up to secure HVT, but as part of a move, Ed will reveal his clip source, take a long-range shot with it with a combi rifle. She will hit, I will pass the save, and I just don't really have enough orders left to bait out anymore. We're basically done, particularly after the Kuroshi Rider has finished her run. So I do some damage. I put down 3 troopers on the attack this turn. The problem is 2 of them were ones that I had killed last turn and which Ed had recovered. So Ed goes into his final turn with just barely enough orders to make something happen, maybe. And so this is a very clinical turn. This is the kind of like turn 3 that Ed is very good at. He's very good at planning out exactly what it is he needs to do, figuring it out. He doesn't wing it. He figures it all out, sees if it's possible, and then commits only if it is. And so this is the plan. This team is going to move out along this direction. There is some ARO. They will need to get down smoke, but not too much. right? They will just need to get some smoke down here to stop the AROs that I've got watching this alleyway, and then they'll need to move forward again, and then get some smoke down here, or probably here more accurately. So move, move, move up and around. Koalas will trigger along the way, but he takes those on his lieutenant, and then it's up and around this direction. Now at this point, he's got 2 orders remaining. I have one model in line of sight holding a box. So the Sukhoi HMG basically runs out into the open. She takes shots from the Thunderbolt, shots from the boarding shotgun Kempertai. Ed's lieutenant is down at this point. I put koalas into it rather than into the Sukhoi on the grounds that he hadn't yet broken it out of the link to use his lieutenant order. And so putting it down represented more of a loss of orders, but it was very close because I hit on a Sukhoi with superb mimetism. But I had higher odds of putting the TAC lieutenant down, so that was a choice that I made. The Sukhoi takes this face-to-face roll, 5 dice out of cover in 16-inch range against the Kempai. Kempai is firing 2 dice back on something like 9s or 10s. The Kempai misses, the Sukhoi hits. She gets 1 shot, hits the Kempai, and puts it unconscious. Now, at this point, the game is a draw because neither of us have been able to do any classifieds, and I have not been able to go and secure the HVT. Ed has exactly 1 order remaining, and he can fulfill that. He can use that order to do a classified maybe. So I, at this point, have a Kasotsu hacker here, and it's looking in this direction so it can see anything coming around either of these corners. Ed has a Kamale paramedic that was in this link team hanging out in this smoke. Now, here is the dichotomy. If the Kamale leaves the smoke, it can fire its Medi Dart into the back of the Kasotsu. The Sukhoi is still alive at this point, so it will get link bonuses. And if it hits, it will do a classified. The problem is that one of these 2 Ryukin decoys is going to be real. And at no point has Ed been able to hand the paramedic box off to anyone else. So herein lies the dilemma. The first is, which of the 2 Ryukin is real? Viewers were told at the beginning of this, you may remember which one is real, but Ed, of course, does not know, and I've given him no information during the game, no held AROs or anything that would tell him. If he moves the Kamale out, takes the back shot with the Gizmo kit into the hacker, and hits, he will win the game. If he hits, regardless of what happens, and this is a Ryukin and it's real and it kills him, he will lose the game because it's the only model he has holding a box. And only in Infinity is the only wargame I have found where you are faced with this kind of a decision, where you first have to decide if something is even real, and then secondly, have to decide if it's worth the risk of baiting it out. Like, this is mint, like this is premium quality Infinity. Now, I am secretly hoping that he goes for it, because 1, it'll be really cool, and 2, I know that this Ryukin is fake. But I can't influence his decision. Ultimately, in his shoes, I think I would have gone for it in a competition, and the reason is this. Right now, we are sitting at a low-scoring draw. If Ed draws this game, he gets 1 tournament point. If he wins this game, a win is still worth, I want to say, 3 TPs, 4 if you go to a major. And so the risk of losing the Kamale, which is contingent firstly on this being real, and secondly of it actually hitting at short range, is that risk, if it does not materialize, you get a lot more tournament points. You get 3 times as many tournament points as if you do nothing. And so because of that, in Ed's shoes, I think I would have gone for it. His call is that since he can move the Kamale out and see what the Ryukin does, and dodge on Fizz 11 versus 10s, 13s to hit, dodge on 11s versus 13s if it does reveal, he's prepared to take that risk and make the dodge. Now, I kind of feel like I would just bait the rocket out and take the Gizmo kit or Medi Dart shot anyway, but that's a slight difference in approach. As it happens, he breaks smoke, the Ryukin is a decoy and does nothing, and so the 2 shots go into the back of the Kasotsu hacker. The Kasotsu opposes with Spotlight, but it does not succeed. It's not very high whip. Ed lands the Medi Dart, fulfills his classified, and wins the game 3 points to 2. And so we have a very narrow Tohaa victory. At the end of the game, we're each holding one box. We are each, Ed's done one classified and I've done none. Now, there are things I absolutely could have done over the course of the game to potentially influence that. I think there is a solid chance. I'm sure I could have done something. I think probably once the Shikami got isolated, I should have just yeeted it forward, like 14 inches forward in a single order, get it into a position where it now starts getting AROs, or Ed has to do something about it, because it's still a Mimetism 6 model heavy infantry. While it's isolated trying to reset, it's doing nothing. I should have moved it forward aggressively much earlier in the game. So that was a mistake. At worst case, if I do that and he never deals with it, it's in position to go and secure the HVT, which would have brought this game back to a tie. I also think, kind of as noted, that it was probably a mistake to leave the Oyuroi where it was. Ed would still have had to have come in after it if I had moved it back to a more defensible position, maybe in suppressive fire, for example, here, or at least somewhere that's out of line of sight of the sniper, and it would have been difficult for him to deal with because, one, he has no close combat, and two, he wouldn't be beating it in close combat even if he did. So I think that is probably, like, the decision to leave the Oyuroi there was not good tag play, and the decision to not be aggressive with the Shikami once it was isolated was not good triage play. So those two things I think are probably the main things that I did incorrectly this game and would do differently if I had a chance to replay this. Otherwise, very happy with how the list performed. We got to see that, like, excellent low end, excellent top end. The order pools were great throughout the entire game, and I was still throwing around things like the Bikers and the Oyuroi, and in particular, unexpected stellar performers was that Arigoto duo. This is something that I mean, I wasn't surprised by exactly, but I have in my head a mental model for how quickly motorcycles move around, and that how quickly motorcycles move around is contingent on N4 movement. But because in N5 you can, for want of a better term, cut corners, right? The rule that only half of your base needs to be supported at any given time. There are diagrams in the book that really clearly show basically a model moving so that at certain points of its movement, it is effectively pushing up against a wall with half of its base there. That makes a difference for models on Silhouette 4 bases. And so some of this movement that the bikers could make, I mean, it added up to half an inch here, half an inch there, compared to doing the movement all the way around the corner. But given that they are already incredibly fast, and given the nice, just like the close combat, the smoke grenades, the shotguns, the boarding pistol on the Arigoto, the regular Arigoto, that little team were absolute performers. So enjoyed this list, enjoyed playing it a great deal, enjoyed playing it against Ed. How I think I'm going to be playing Tohaa if I play Tohaa for CanCon, and how Ed is playing Tohaa will probably be pretty similar, but as noted, there are a few things that I think are well worth taking, stuff like the Engineer in particular. And I am leaning away from, if I'm not taking the Nikul, I don't need as many symbiomates. If I don't need as many symbiomates, I'm probably going to be taking a more like soft defense where I'm just using things like Mirror Ball as a defensive tool in ARO. But I need to spend some more time with those lists, and I need to decide in the first instance if I'm even going to play Tohaa for CanCon. There are a few factions that are calling my name, but I have not yet settled on one, and it's actually getting a little bit agonizing given that the event is only about 4 weeks away. Regardless, taking on viewer challenges like this one are always a great time, so thanks again to channel supporters Croxatau and Dennis for the requests for Tohaa on the part of Croxatau and JSA Ōban on the part of Dennis. I hope both of you have enjoyed this battle report and getting to see both factions kind of flex some of their strengths in N5. As a reminder, if you'd like to support the channel, you can do so via the Buy Me a Coffee link in the video description or by becoming a channel member. Big thanks to everyone who has, and obviously I take requests for faction focuses, battle reports, etc. from channel supporters and donors. As always, I hope very much that you've enjoyed this, and I'll see you next time.